the first couple of talks I went to, it's like, okay, there's some big money behind this, right? It looks like a
Yeah.
rock, like a concert. And then just like out in the exhibit halls and then outside of the events, I got to meet some cool people, people who were working, people who were building stuff, and they weren't in on the main stage. So I went just out of pure curiosity just to see what it was like. And I'm like, okay, big money's already here. I know a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people were kind of mixed feelings about the whole event, you know. So I went with zero expectations and just
Yeah,
like,
I
all
mean
right,
that's a good spot to come from. It is kind of funny, like the whole big money stage. Like, I still remember going to the Porcupine Freedom Festival and just going up there and being excited to like use crypto because nowhere else in the world was that happening. And then Patrick Byrne, who was running Overstock at the time, was like
mm,
talking about that, and I still remember that the day that they accepted crypto payments, running Overstock, Bitcoin specifically. Was like talking and so about that, and it was kind of funny how that first off it was like huge. It's like some place takes Bitcoin. It's like wow, this is insane. And then uh, New Hampshire had the highest per capita by far percentage of Bitcoin purchases on Overstock in those first couple months, even beyond Utah, where the company was based. Just because the New Hampshire crazy libertarian community, of which I am part, was
I
like the
couldn't tell,
only, of course, was like the only people, I guess, using crypto statistically, as in like it was just so like our merry band of a few hundred people or whatever they were doing it here was statistically significant to Bitcoin usage globally. And
man.
now it's just like all these big things are on board. It's crazy. It's a very different world.
I would imagine. I mean, you've been in it for a while, so you've seen the changes, the evolution, you know.
Yeah. Um, so I'll permit a little you know phone usage here real quick if you want to retweet me. I just tagged you because it's a new link. It's a new YouTube link,
All right, new YouTube
but
link.
we are live and stuff on the new link.
Cool. I'll give
And
that out to everybody.
are live and
All right. Here, we'll
mm-hmm.
send this out to a few folks.
Yeah, whoever missed, whoever was like
Send this out to a few folks.
specifically, yeah, whoever was like specifically, oh yeah, I really want to watch this. Those people. Everyone else, just the retweet should do it. Hopefully, everyone lives on Twitter like I do. Well, hopefully not. Which is a fun side tangent on that thing of just how I enjoy Twitter. I didn't used to. I've been on Twitter for about I think 10 years now, maybe 10 to 11 years. I've been, and for the first like half or decade or so, I didn't use it very much, didn't get any traction, and it's just been mostly since crypto Twitter that stuff started to come. It started to become a lot more fun, and now it's like now it's something I use a lot and enjoy. And I have to say, like I have a very positive experience on Twitter. There's a couple times I come up like I spar with some like dumb people, and there's a couple people saying some stupid, but like I think it's largely gotten just the way I use it is largely works really well, and sometimes I piss a lot of people off, and I just don't get on Twitter for like a few days or a day or two, and when I come back, I don't like address people. That it's like people have this like crippling thing like, oh, you tweeted at, you answered my thing, I have to go back. Like sometimes I'll be going back and forth with someone, I'll just lose interest and stop responding and move on with my life, and it's so freeing. And then for some people, like Jordan Peterson quit Twitter recently because it's just too toxic. He just felt his like anxiety go up and all this. I'm like, well, I'm sure for him it is, and
Right.
but I don't know. It's kind of funny how that works. But crypto Twitter is pretty crazy. How like one
I've been,
Elon tweet goes and just destroys the market.
yeah, I mean, I've been lurking mostly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for years, because I don't really do a lot of social media, and I started
Mm-hmm.
getting bored. So I'm like, all right, well, let's go see what's going on crypto Twitter, right, Bitcoin Twitter, and
Yeah.
all this stuff. And, I stayed for the memes. The memes were great, very spicy, and I got a good kick out of stuff. And then I started engaging with some folks, and then after a while, like, yeah, what you would say is like, all right, somebody you're talking to, and they're just being argumentative to be
Mm-hmm.
argumentative. There's no real end game or point. So it's just like, all right, enjoy. You can take your so-called win, and we'll see you tomorrow, and
Yeah.
have a good right.
Well,
But yeah,
politics is what does it for the most part on Twitter, because crypto Twitter is a little like crypto political, but it's not like politics has some like, at least with crypto, you're in it because you want to get something out of it. You're in it because you believe in the tech. You're excited to make money, whatever. There's a bunch of reasons you might be in crypto, but in politics, you're in it because you just hate the world mostly. And so there's a lot of like people who are just, also people on crypto Twitter aren't always the best at like arguing and formulating points and things like that. But the
mhm,
political people, not to say that they are, but they're great at that maximum destruction, maximum fallacy, right? The straw man, but they're like dialed in. And so whenever I dip my toes into Twitter, and I get some engagement from people who don't agree with me, which most people, that if they don't agree, they just don't engage at all. But like sometimes you get some people, and then literally my notifications will be all one person who's got like a mental health problem, and it's
that
like,
one guy.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right,
they're
well,
they're
let's officially roll the intro now that we've been going for a little while, and I haven't seen any more disruptions. But well, fingers crossed. And let me hit the intro graphic and let's get going. So, hey everyone, happy Friday, and thanks for being here, and thanks for being back if you jumped on the other stream and watched it go down in a blaze of glory in like a 2 minutes. So, if you're on the correct stream, that's good. Thanks for being with me and dealing with all my live stream problems. I'm joined by the one and only Esteban Valdez. How's it going, man?
What's up, dude?
Yeah. So, good day, good Friday. I'll point to you guys to, you must. I'm gonna put questions up on the screen that you throw some money behind. I haven't figured out how to do like a good lightning receptacle thing, because lightning is like LN URLs just coming around for the, for like a static address you could always use, and it's not universal, but the BTC address is goes right to a lightning wallet. So just in case you want to throw me some there. But anyway, enough with all that stuff. Let's just go on into yeah, Davos and all that. At the WEF 2022, Swift probably won't exist in 5 years, says MasterCard CEO. Michael Miebach, CEO of MasterCard, told an audience of blockchain executives that he expects Swift to phase out of existence in as little as 5 years. And just talking on panel of like CBDCs and all that kind of good stuff or not good stuff. And yeah, so first off, you seem to have a little bit of experience in CBDCs, or not CBDCs, I should say, but the SWIFT system. So first off, do you
Yeah.
think he's correct?
One more time.
Do you think he's correct? Do you think he's right on this stuff that SWIFT is going away?
Yeah, 100%. That's.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've been talking about this stuff for a long time, right? And
Mm-hmm.
anybody who's been paying attention to the WEF since like 2015, they've always been talking about moving things in a more sustainable, digital, inclusive way. Uh, I mean, you can just again find a YouTube link. You can go on their YouTube page, and scroll about. They've also had CBDC white papers that they've published too. I think it's like 2020
Mm-hmm.
and 2021. They had an update. So I mean, it's been talking for about a while, and you have companies like Mastercard and Visa that obviously are using Swift and making big investments into crypto because they see the writing on the wall. and
Yeah.
it's just a really dated system. It's I have my frustrations with it. We have clients internationally, and then I have contractors and employees who work internationally too,
Hmm.
and just dealing with them indirectly through our bank. It's just probably one of the most frustrating things in the world, especially when you have bank holidays and you need something to get needs either upgrading or just become completely obsolete.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think it's probably one of the biggest pain points of the fiat system. I'm not super familiar in the fiat system because um, I haven't really used it much in the last like 7 years, and before that, didn't have very much money to use it with anyway. And so, but it seems like uh, the kind of push to it seems like crypto in a way is pushing to modernization in other ways. Like this kind of new pressure is like, well, they've been just using this old terrible system forever. And now it's like, oh, we better get kind of unified, still centralized and terrible payment rails for these kinds of things with better technology. We better get that in now. They're kind of rushing to do that. But the real answer is, well, what pushed you to scramble to innovate real quick? Maybe it was something that makes all this kind of stuff obsolete, you know? Maybe it's, actually decentralized digital payment rails with money that's not controlled by, governments and stuff.
Yeah, it is a lot to do with control, right? I mean, if you have home field advantage, you feel more confident, you feel
Mm-hmm.
like you're capable of doing a little bit more. You're hoping that your opposition, or your opponent is not going to be
Mm-hmm.
able to dominate you. And so you have people who are at the top of the pyramid, so to speak, who like staying comfy. They like their way of living. They like the way things are for them. And even though they may try to appeal to a larger base, it's probably just in namesake. For example, I mean, when Google AdSense came out, it wasn't McDonald's who was advertising on it first, right? Or places like Craigslist, or even the internet. It took a while for large companies to get established. You had a lot of people in that smaller domain, with like IRC chat, IRCs and other message boards, building, people who didn't have a voice at first, and that's what benefited them the most, right? So
Mm-hmm.
these, people up in the higher echelons, the 0.0001% of it all, kind of enjoy what's going on, and fine. But I think like you said earlier, the writing on the wall of like, hey, this is decentralized, this is disruptive, this is circumventing your payment rails, your channels, and all that stuff
Mm-hmm.
is threatening. Right? It's like streaming services. Streaming services interrupted the cable business. People were jumping on YouTube, and then as more and more websites started coming about, places like HBO and Cinemax and all these
Mm-hmm.
other cable channels realized, well, hey, we need to get on board this because nobody's watching our stuff anymore. So how do we
Yeah.
get into it? Yeah. So,
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I personally, um, I'm kind of wondering how it's going to turn out because obviously I would not have foreseen we'd be where we are today in a lot of different ways. And so I think the kind of ripple has been hanging in the wings for like a long time, kind of seeing, okay, well, the entire, like the Bitcoin vision is too radical. It's too far ahead or removed from stuff. We'll just replace Swift. And unfortunately, I don't think it's like, that the meme, it's like, stop trying to make Ripple replace Swift. It's not going to happen. It's like,
right.
I don't think it's going to happen because um, the choice is to uh, would probably be to use a system that is directly controlled by the powers and actors that be, rather than a completely new system or the new guns. And ultimately, I don't think that's going to work either. Though I don't really see us going to like, oh, this giant innovation leap that we have with blockchain technology. I don't think it's just going to nudge to modernize the same old systems, and that's what we get stuck with. I think that we're really getting close to something radically different. And so it'll probably be I think it'll probably be whatever the dominant payment network ends up being. It will probably be these big key players eventually just kind of like half give out. They kind of settle and decide to control a piece of it, to where like they'll run them like a Bitcoin mining pool, for example, or they'll run some Ethereum validators or whatever, and they'll still have a good amount of control, but they won't have like all the control like they used to. It's just like because the new people jumping in who built these systems and were there since the beginning will still have like a significant, there will be a turning over of the influencers, I guess. That's my feeling on this.
Yeah, the pendulum swings, right? I recall it was back in high school in '97, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine and I, we were first getting online, you know, at home. We had our computers and we found Adobe for the first time, right? And we were doing digital art, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
our peers were still, dabbling with one machine in one place. And I just remember the backlash we got from our peers and teachers and all that. Well, that's not real art. That's not real art. That's not, things are going to go back that way. And we fast forward to now, and just about every artist that's working professionally is doing things digitally.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that, like Adobe is the one and only monopoly. There's, several dozen of products that are also open source that work equally just as well. And there are people who are still working with very analog mediums. So, I mean, it's probably going to be a place where you have different currencies and payment rails, and you may have a little bit more choice, right? So, like,
Yeah.
you're not stuck just like I love Bitcoin. It's a really great tool. It's been very good to me for like the last couple of years. It's been great for my team. It's been great for my clients. But if at some point somebody wants to switch over and use like Zcash or
Mm-hmm.
Monero for whatever the case may be, it's like they're open to do that, right? If they want
Mm-hmm.
to jump into the stablecoin world, it's like you're open to do that too. You have choice, right? Which is
Yeah.
something we haven't really had in a long time is optionality. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's I'm stuck. Like for example, when I'm working with clients internationally, it's okay. Well, what medium are what's the currency we're going to use? What are we going to base the project on? We're going to base it on Canadian dollars, British pounds, euros, yens, wands, pesos, dollars. And we only get that mix. But it's I like the
Mm-hmm.
options that we have now. If somebody wants to do things, and maybe that's I think Jim Rickards put this one best a couple
Mm-hmm.
months ago. He's like, we have money nests, but we don't necessarily have like money itself. So it's
Mm-hmm.
probably going back to a place where you can choose your payment options, right? If you're a
Yeah.
producer and you want to be paid in Dash, okay, you can get paid like you're the
Mm-hmm.
producer. You dictate the payment terms. If I want to be paid in Bitcoin, it's like this is what the cost is, set the fixed price, etc. You have options that work for both parties. You know, and
Yeah.
that's exciting to see. It's having that choice.
Yeah, and that's something that I mean, it's little off script, but that's something that's very, it's becoming far easier today. Is so for example, I know probably my favorite crypto payments processor for online transactions is coin payments because they've been around forever. Everyone uses them, and I sometimes call them shitcoin payments because they accept every crypto under the sun, basically. Like everyone, even things that you thought were long dead that like barely exist anymore, like just everything. And so, like you could pay with like the most random token you ever consider if you want to do this. And some people just take all of them, and I don't think it'll be that diverse in the future. But at the same time, there's something the friction of switching between currencies is extremely going down by a huge margin because so for example some friends of mine run a payment processor called CTX, and they take me a usual like half dozen payment coins or whatever, and they're working on a Thorchain integration back end so that through a decentralized protocol you could receive whatever coin you wanted. So let's just say you're Bitcoin maxi and that's all you want,
Right.
but you get customers that are like, I want to, or like say you have customers in like different countries where something else is popular, or that like, the fee levels are too low for some kind of thing, and they want to use something else, and it just, you could receive it, and then just through the magic of an actual decentralized protocol, right? Just zap, and then there you go. You ended up receiving whatever you want, minus like a very small like, trading fee that works on the protocol. And then in that way, it just, you don't really need to care what people pay you, and they just say like, it might be at some point they're like, hey, this weird exotic coin, like I want to use that one. You might be like, all right, I don't know, I got to see if it's supported on this thing. But it'll be pretty interesting to see. I do think that the number of payment options are going to start to like condense in crypto
Mhm.
to like, X for a while. Who knows? That's just a random guess.
Right. I mean, we have hundreds of currencies currently,
Mm-hmm.
so it's just going to be a multi-currency world. Hopefully, we don't get locked in on the CBDC front, and
Mm-hmm.
we're not able to switch out, and can't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
But you never know, because I mean, once in power and people like, the taste of it, it's kind of hard to
Mm-hmm.
let go of it sometimes, you know. And that's kind of the troubling part of this all. It's like there's a lot of speculation. We can
Mm-hmm.
all talk about what could or couldn't happen, but ultimately we'll only know when it's there.
Yeah.
And that's the question, like, do we even want it to be there to begin with? So
Yeah, of course. Let me hit this inflation thing. As economic conditions continue to worsen, financial experts worldwide are increasingly placing the blame the feet of the United States Federal Reserve. I wonder why. After the central bank has been slow to respond to rising inflation early on. Basically, analysts say the Fed has no choice but to continue to raise interest rates. So, yeah, what's your hot take on that whole mess?
I mean, yeah, they can try, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately, you have things like an election year, and
Mm-hmm.
you
Oh
certain
yeah.
people at play, like, and especially since the Fed has become highly politicized, one way or another, it doesn't matter who's in power at that point. But nobody wants to go in on a losing streak. So there may
Mm-hmm.
be some pressure for the Fed to ease up on it. And there's been articles about this popping up as of recent on like Zero Hedge and Business Insider, where it's like the Fed may have to ease up for a little bit. Come, I think they were saying like September, just to get some kind of rally for people to start feeling good and change the narrative. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's like, oh, okay, come voting time, hey, things are looking great, especially if you've been beaten down so low to the floor, and you're just popping your head up for the first time. It's like, oh yeah, things are great, but you were standing minutes earlier. uh, it's just they're gonna have to. I mean, again, I can only speculate, but I think, how do you dig yourself out of this hole, right?
Yeah.
Just, I mean, you just have to stop digging and then start working on climbing your way out. But at this point, you might as well continue to dig until you end up on the other side of the world.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the it's like the kind of Ponzi-ish levels of that. The thing is, like automatic systems automatically adjust, and when you have a manual system, like trying to control the economy from the top, it doesn't mean like you're still not immune to the laws of nature, but at some point, uh, you they try to control things here and there, and inflation rates and things like that, because they have the economy the way it is because they've been keeping artificially low interest rates, right? And
Right.
they, like, for example, let's say last year or this year, it's like you got like a 3 or 4% interest rate on like a 30-year mortgage, and I mean that's lower than inflation. Requires its own set of conditions. And so the thing is, the bubbles keep on being blown for so long. It's just like when if you're staying up for like 3 days straight and you keep just pounding the coffee to like keep yourself up. Eventually, it doesn't work anymore. But if you can't afford to crash right now because you got a deadline or whatever, you can't afford to just let that happen. And so they're going to keep on pumping it up until it'll be a good time to crash, or which never really is, but or until they just can't pump it up anymore. And so it's like you'd think that after crazy inflation, for example, and the interest rates, you think that they could just afford to pull it back and be like, okay, well, no one's gonna we're gonna give people no reason to go to crypto now. But then they can't because they're on this. He who rides a tiger does not easily dismount. They're on it. They're there. It's kind of the way we're headed, and the only way through, the only way out is through, and the only through is to just start jumping on the life rafts.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say it's hubris, but I don't know if that's really the right word, right? Maybe, maybe in some context, but essentially they're pulling levers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Inflate, deflate, inflate, deflate, and they're not allowing the markets to work. They're
Mm-hmm.
not. I think this is where my big fascination in the crypto space itself. It's like, to me, this seems like the most freest market we have right now, right? Projects that are good, they'll succeed. Projects that are bad, they crash and burn hard. There's no
Mm-hmm.
bailout. There's nobody there to come and save you, and you've got to learn, from your mistakes, right? And I don't know if that's the only market we really have per se, where it's like nobody's interfering just yet. I mean, they're trying to, um,
Mm-hmm.
but
It's
again, it's just
close.
thinking. Yeah, it's like thinking that I can control how the markets will go, right? I want it to inflate. I want markets. I want people to buy this and not buy that. I want people to stay home and never go outside, or I don't want people to stay indoors anymore. I want them to go spend, spend, spend. How do we? It's just that's so that's the antithesis of human nature and desire and what people want to do, you know, and that's just more of a command economy than anything
Mm-hmm.
else, right? And so,
Yeah.
how long do you keep that up? And at some point, you're pressing the lever, pushing buttons, moving levers, and nothing's moving anymore, right? It's like the car gears are stuck, and you're going downhill now.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the free market kind of thing. A radically free market has a lot of crazy stuff that happens in it, but over time, there's always opportunities for it to go kind of fill out the other spaces. And I'm trying to think of like what are the only radically free markets are ones who haven't been regulated yet, and if they haven't been regulated yet, that must mean that they're new. And so and unfortunately though, because of the money, anything with the old money is probably still regulated, right? And so basically, crypto and all its spawned industries are the only really free markets. The closest I was able to think about just now, as far as like free market type like industries, is probably the martial art industry, because there hasn't been like in the Western world widespread, Eastern and then other martial arts instruction until like the last 50 years or so, really. It's like the Bruce Lee times really made it a thing. And then it wasn't until like the birth of modern mixed martial arts in the early 90s was like the start of like that, the actual industry where it's like, okay, now you have to figure out, you have a free market environment of beat someone up, right? The truest free market environment you can have. And then people are finding out how to compete for the top spot there in an extremely loose, i.e., unregulated rule set, which has gotten more regulated over time, but it's still basically very, loose. And so, what gets the job done the best? Who can you, what, dietitians, whatever, exercise programs, etc. else for athletes works the best, or, what moves work the best, what styles work the best, and then you just anyone can open like because I taught taekwondo for many many years, and it's like each organization has their own like I guess franchising requirements, but outside of that, literally any jackass can just put on a belt and just say I'm a master, and like okay, where no one cares, you just what can you do that you're kind of out there. And it's kind of like the early the shitcoin boom of like 2013 and around there, where just everyone was hitting copy paste on the Bitcoin code with a couple little tweaks, and there were just a million things out there. It's kind of the same thing where like everyone's a sensei, and over
Right.
time it turned into, well, now it's starting to turn into like a utilitarian, slowly I have to say, it's not going that fast, but utilitarian thing where now you have to, now your competition is not on sales, it's on results, and that's what
Right.
kind of drives the sales. And so now it's like, well, which martial arts are effective, which schools can teach you to be an effective fighter in a way that will win you fights and make you money and make you a living. And
Right.
so that's all there. And then we're starting to sort of transition into that a little bit with the crypto world. The crypto world's like what, 10, 15 years behind the martial art world. And now I would say the martial art world is starting to be like practical finally. Like really like encompassed, well understood. Like the free market seems to have like ironed out into something that, people understand. So the crypto world's not too far behind.
That's an interesting take on it. I mean, it reminds me of like my industry for
Mm-hmm.
animation. People would work at a studio and then they'll quit, but they'll take some of the work product with them, make their own reel, say I'm a shop, and then try to hustle for work. And sometimes it works, and sometimes they don't have the chops for business, and they get punished pretty heavily, by going out of business or having to go back to the studio they stole stuff from with their tail between their legs. And I mean, still, even in the art world,
Mm-hmm.
nothing is 100%. Like nobody knows how to price anything still,
Okay.
and
Oh,
it's like it's so
that's just everyone. Like the
yeah.
laughable, like how laughably bad people are at pricing cracks me up. And it doesn't, like the martial art world's a big thing of that too. But then even like the contractor world, like how do you price your plumbing services and stuff? And no one knows how to charge.
Right. But I think that's the interesting part about all of this is like you start to find out what's the value behind the product or service you're giving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you can do that is just having that market be open. And if you don't agree that my services are X amount of dollars, then what do you think it is, and where can we meet in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I think that's something that we, as far as businesses go, right? You don't want to just price yourself out of the market. You want to
Mm-hmm.
be able to stay in business, but you don't want to cut it so low. And the consumer doesn't want to not have the product or service available. So there's got to be some sort of peaceful resolution between the two, right?
Yeah, of course.
I feel like that's the way it really is, on the individual level, right? But when you're looking at nations, you know, it's not really that way, all the
Mm-hmm.
time. It's, oh, we're going to tell you what the market is. We're going to tell you what you can spend on, or this is illegal or that's not illegal. And
Yeah. Or, the value of one UST is equal to one USD. That's another price fixing disaster that happened. But maybe that's a little too soon, huh?
I don't know if it's too soon. I mean, in
Yeah.
the digital realm, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes, like almost 5 weeks. So
Yeah.
things move on, pick up quickly. So the other part, and this is what I've been finding about with you know crypto Twitter, Bitcoin Twitter, whatever Twitter version you want, is sometimes these people, what was it, Fat Man, I guess
Oh
is
yeah,
one of
I've
the
followed
handles.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really spicy. And I've got my bags of popcorn just sitting on the sideline. Just every time I'm reading, it's like, who needs fiction? This stuff is great, you know. And
Yeah.
it's very cautionary if you're paying attention to it. And you're kind of people are very relentless and ruthless sometimes too. So
Yeah, and that's one thing that, like, as someone who believes in maximum freedom and minimum government all the way to zero, uh, it becomes a little inconvenient sometimes, but it's just a truth of the world is when you have radically free systems, like the unfree systems, I
right,
believe are a net drag on humanity. However, they do tend to a lot of times be the biggest drag on low level unsavory characters. High
right,
level unsavory characters run the show. That's just the way it happens. Like the smart polished crooks are all in power. But like the
right,
petty crooks do kind of suffer under the kind of regulated system. So when you have a radically unregulated system, they all go right there. And I've
Right.
noticed that with like the greater liberty movement and stuff. Like in the early days, you have a lot of just like weird creeps and like scammers and people like that. It was like a big percentage of them. And then just as the movement grew and became a little bit more, normal, they kind of ended up, finding other places. And the same thing with crypto, right? Like any as I try to have a good like everyone's kind of kicking themselves for the Luna thing about like, oh, how could I buy into this, like what turned out to be like a Ponzi scheme kind of. And
Right.
and it's like, how do you not see with like the Bitcoin guy and everything, how do you not see that that is a freaking scam? How do you just not? And it's like, well, it was very overtly scammy back then, and now there's a little bit more tongue in cheek about the scammy, or like layers to kind of hide it. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, the snake oil salesmen, they just get better with time,
mhm.
right? It's
Yeah.
get a little bit more polish, get a little bit more money behind it. They understand like what's going to
Mhm.
attract people, and maybe they're not. I mean, they obviously don't think it's a scam. They believe themselves very highly, right?
Mhm.
And it's just more opportunism, which I found really interesting. Like the whole Luna debauchery is,
Mhm.
I'm just looking at the founder of it all, like Do Kwon, right?
Yeah.
Listening
Justin's
to his
son.
interviews
Oh wait,
and it,
it's not the same person.
yeah, it's not. It's just, and then other founders, and that's something that I've also been noticing too, is just looking at founders and their projects and their personalities and how do they interact with others. And
Mhm.
some of it just kind of like, yeah, you can read the white paper and all that stuff, and the technical aspects sound good, but then you go to sort of the choke point, right?
Mhm.
Which is the founder, which is the things they say and do, how do they interact, and the general public will look at that, right? Because that's just how we are as people. We'll
Yeah, of
look
course.
to like those individuals, and it's like, well, this guy's just saying the most brutal things, overconfident, overzealous, over whatever, no matter which crypto project it is, right? All
Yeah.
across the board. And that's either a turn on or a turn off. And, for a lot of people, it's like like the reason they get into these things is because they're looking for a way out of their current
Yeah.
situation. And then they fall in love with this project and the creator of the project and the foundation behind it. And it's just the downhill, slip from there.
Mhm.
And it's unfortunate. But the part that really gets me is that people are like, I still believe after the after everybody's been broken. It's like, I've committed, I'm holding this bag, I can't let go, I'm hoping that something pops up out of this. And it's like, dude, just cut your losses and you know learn the lesson, right?
Yeah, it is killer crazy to see like brand loyalty in crypto, especially since almost no one uses crypto to develop a personality around it on Twitter. It's just like,
Yeah.
well, you don't touch it. Like it's a graphical, at least they like drive a Tesla, it's like iPhone. No one's like an iPhone diehard, an Apple diehard who just owns only Android stuff. It just doesn't exist. You
Right.
just it's just kind of weird the way that works, and people get really attached on these things. There's a lot of like a deep sense of belonging that people are looking for who don't belong to other tribes and things. But then there's also just that like, under the guise of protection, the government and fiat systems have just put so many burdens and so much weight on top of the global economy on everyone. And so people might have like stable lives, but they're stable in a very narrow channel to where their potential for growth and growth of wealth is very limited unless they're one of the much more educated people, one of the people who has a lot of capital to deploy, all that kind of stuff. And then they're just with crypto, it's like, oh, if I can get crypto, I could go up to here. I could actually retire when I otherwise couldn't figure out how to do that. And so then they become emotionally attached to that idea of like, I could actually be somebody, which I couldn't in the old world. And then
Right.
it's kind of how we end up like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's crypto, stocks, real estate. There's some kind of pain point that they have,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to fix something that ultimately they think an outside force is going to be able to do that, or an outside product or
Mm-hmm.
an outside person. And I get that, um, but at the same time, it's all these scammers. They kind of, it's very predatory in that way. Very, in a very indirect manner. And yeah, brand loyalty is one thing, um, but it's such a deeper problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's such a deeper issue. And you know, I was chatting with like I had this meeting with our chamber of commerce because we're trying to like make our city, of St. Petersburg,
Yeah.
Florida, a lot more crypto friendly. Very.
Yeah.
That's
Let's
one
just
of the things that
let's
they
just
want to
roll
do.
into that whole thing about your
Yeah.
how you're doing crypto stuff today and like where you came from and all
Yes.
that. But yeah, so we'll just hit the Chamber of Commerce thing, so I don't want to interrupt that thought.
Yeah. So part of the thing that I've been doing quietly for some time, is working with, the Chamber of Commerce, our Economic Development Council, and on
Mm-hmm.
my own, just like going around to, because there's a lot of mom and pop shops here still, especially in the downtown area. All the chain, stores and big box marts, those are outside of the city limits. And so who could stand to benefit from, Bitcoin, crypto, whatever, more than, mom and pop shops, and people. There's also just another part of the city which is underbanked and unbanked, and trying to get
Yeah.
them involved into the ecosystem, right? Trying to get them involved in that way. So it's like, where's the pain? Well, the pain is this, right? Pain is there's, everybody's competing against inflation. Then you may have some deflation, and that might help for a little bit, but how do we get all these individuals involved? How do we better like our community? How do we better, our business community, which really is, just small businesses, left and
Yeah.
right. Um, and so that's where I've been working with our chamber, and with our economic board. Is like, well, how do we get that? How do we get, how do we sustain our small business community, so that they can adapt with the times and move forward? How do we get the people who couldn't participate in the current financial system, into the system now? And crypto has been sort of the champion, of this one. Branding aside, but it's like the main point is getting people access to participate. You know, if if we look at, Bitcoin and crypto as a way to communicate value, then essentially it's a form of speech, and
Mm-hmm.
these people who are not able to participate have no voice.
Of
So
course.
that's sort of the big push. It's like, how do we get these people to have a voice? How do we get them to, get involved in the economy? How do we help them, rise? How do we rise all tides? You know, that's then just looking for solutions. So that's what I've been doing, sort of in the background for the last couple years. And
Yeah. So what year did you get into crypto? I mean, first, when did you hear about it to a point where you got interested? And then when did you actually like jump in?
so I heard of it in 2010, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, didn't really pay too much attention to it. It was very political about, the 2008 crisis. Like
Mm-hmm.
my family lost everything, and it's also dating back to like 2001. During that time of craziness, it's like, all right, what's really going on. So I was never paying attention to the economy or to finance or monetary, policies or fiscal policies or anything like that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until like 2019 where my business was doing really well. And the thing about like animation is, the margins for us are so razor thin, and the rest of our industry is highly leveraged. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can look up companies like Digital Domain, Rhythm and Hughes, Arc Productions. I mean, they were just one missed payment away from bankruptcy, and they closed their door soon after. Right.
Wow.
So you're talking hundreds of thousands of jobs lost because of, the way our economic system is built, the incentives around it. And I've always been trying to figure a way out, like, well, how can we not be like these people? How can we, do better? And I was always a precious metals guy, from the start.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, like, okay, well, what if I put like precious metals into the company reserves and use that as a way to preserve, our purchasing power, because I wanted to be able to do that. And then in 2020, during the lockdowns, I was like, well, hey, silver's on the move, gold's on the move. Maybe I can use this to pay people and, not lose our shirt while everybody else is suffering. Right. And it was really interesting because the entertainment world just kind of flipped upside down. You went from all these live action productions and they just stopped. Everybody switched over to animation and we had this big boom. Right.
Yeah,
And
oddly enough, like you think
yeah,
that during a crisis of sorts, an economic and global crisis, I guess, you think that animation is like a luxury good almost. It would not really take off during that time. But funny enough, because people still wanted to be entertained, especially because people were sitting around not working, you know,
right.
they still had a demand for the industry, but the industry could not compete in the physical world. And so
Right.
it's kind of funny how that works.
Yeah, I mean, even during the good years, right? Like most small animation shops were having such a hard time staying open, keeping employees paid, keeping their vendors and contractors, taken care of. And so we're just like, all right, we don't really have much. Like my business isn't all cash business, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't take loans or lines of credit, even though it would be very helpful and get us leveraged up. It's in this environment, it's almost too dangerous, right? You're playing with fire, and you're playing with matches at a gasoline station. Is kind of the way I
Yeah.
look at it. And I don't want to be in that situation. So how do we preserve our ability to do this? And I was looking at it was 2019. I was really paying attention to the macro factors of the economy, our industry. What's the thing that's going to happen next? If we're losing, depending upon whose statistics you read, was like 8% inflation or it's a 16% inflation, which one you want, and just trying to preserve the purchasing power for my employees and my contractors. So I was trying to pay them in gold. That
That's a
that was
noble thought.
yeah. It most of them have never seen an ounce of gold in their hand. They've never held an ounce of gold in their hand at all, or an ounce of silver, and they wouldn't know what
Hmm.
to do with it. And I'm like, okay, well, that's the problem with the precious metals is nobody understands that the education factor is gone, the utility factor for like everyday commerce is gone, and I have people around the globe too. So what am I going to do? Mail them, like 4 ounces of gold, or silver to pay their wages, and they'll get there by like next week, or in a
Hmm.
month. Um, and then in 2020, like during the election season too, and I think it was getting close to the height of like that, a lot of movements happening all at once. And
Hmm.
if you had contrarian views to, Hollywood, you'd find yourself on the receiving end of the stick. And that was often the result of like, bank foreclosures or seizures or denial of service. And it's like, all right, well, how do I take care of like my crew? How do I take care of my company? How do I take care of myself? And that's when I really, really, really got into Bitcoin, into the crypto space. It's just like, okay, what's going to work? And I didn't just dive into Bitcoin first. I dove into everything. Like I read white papers for Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dash, Litecoin, Ripple when it was still listed on some exchanges. Just a whole bunch. I think it was like 20 coins altogether. And
Hmm.
just through experimentation of like what would work, what wouldn't, and then kind of settling on what I have now. Um, for a lot of reasons, it's just it works for us. And it's like
Yeah.
here, I'm gonna send you Bitcoin. It was very easy for them to take. They understood it because everybody at that point, and I found it funny, is that I would go to a restaurant later on, like, and notice that okay, the Thai place that I go to, or my barber, or whoever already has Bitcoin. Maybe like
Hmm.
$5-10 put into it. So it
It's a
just
good
worked for us.
conversation starter. Yeah.
Yeah. And for my team, it's like, hey, let me just send this over to you, even though you're sitting in South Korea right now, right? I'll just
Hmm.
here's your check or here's your payment. And it's like, oh wow, that worked. And it's like, what can I do with it next? And then from that point forward, in 2021, we started accepting Bitcoin payments from clients. That was very interesting. It kind of led to another boom for us because people who had Bitcoin or other crypto. I was like, yeah, I want to spend it. I want to make something with it. I want to do something with this newfound capital. Where can I go? So they'd hire us. We use it direct wallet to wallet and just start issuing payments in that. And I'm like, wow, this actually works. Like this is functional. It's act with it. Like not everybody took to it, right? I was watching
Mm-hmm.
Naomi Brockwell's videos, and some other people's like, how do you do this? Like, what's the best way? And then since that time, just been documenting, in journals, like how do I do this? And then this year I've been giving workshops, to my crew, to other businesses, and saying, this is my experience. This is what I've done. This is how you use it.
Mm-hmm.
Places like Bitrefill, came along with their bill pay service as of
Yeah, that was
recent.
great.
It was huge, and I feel I feel like their timing was very succinct on a maybe a joking level, but I had a buddy who wanted to kind of jump in and swim and say, hey, I'll take my payment in Bitcoin, and he had to pay off a bill, but he wasn't sure how to do it, and he's over in
Mm.
the middle of America, and he contacts me up afterwards like, well, this was a fun experiment. I learned a lot. I also learned how to piss my wife off even more now. So we're gonna cut that experiment. And it's like, okay, gotta work really hard on the educational front, like
Yeah.
really hard. And I think I was reading something earlier this week. The Federal Reserve put out a paper that was saying like only 13% of Americans, have held or hold crypto at present, and of the 13, 2% have used it for.
I think, but it also, assuming it's correct, that's pretty good. That's like out of 10 people, one is a crypto person or has been at some point.
Right.
And that's like, that kind of confirms my gut feeling that it's that we're coming into, once this bear market goes down and we start to hit the bull run again in a couple of years, that we're going to hit the early majority adoption phase, where
Right.
it's not mass adopt, not like everyone takes it, but it's just like you will see like 1 out of 10 people at the coffee shop paying with it on a daily basis, like just people you have never heard of. And
Right.
so also that 2% figure you quoted seems pretty high. I think it's probably lower than that, because just based on my experience of like crypto diehards who have
Hmm.
ever done anything, I think maybe some people are like, well, I like sold some and then I paid for something with it, and they counted that. There might be just my gut feel. Maybe I'm pessimistic, but it's yeah.
Rightfully so, because I mean, to me, 13% was rather
Mm-hmm.
high, right?
Yeah.
It's like I don't know if that's I mean, when they're doing their CPI numbers, right? It's like, oh, more people bought chicken than they did beef. Let's switch out the numbers to make it even things out or shine things in a better light. I don't know if the Fed was trying to put things in a better light or make it seem like it wasn't as important. But one thing that I do see though is that like on the city level, like for us here in St. Pete, um,
Mm-hmm.
we want to get this thing into the economy now, right? Like we want to start. They see it. Everybody understands what it is, and so to me, this feels like the day before Wi-Fi, came on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's still plugged in, with Ethernet cables, and sooner or
I
later
gotta
the
be
Wi-Fi
plugged in
pops up.
with
Yeah.
Ethernet to make sure I don't get these streaming problems. But yeah, anyway.
Yep. So it's very early, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of macro factors at play, which makes
Mm-hmm.
me very optimistic, cautiously optimistic about
Yeah.
the future. Um, Even though there are some pretty terrible things out there. Again, a lot of it's speculation. We won't know until we get there. And it's just like let's just kind of take it day by day, but still very optimistic to see where it goes.
Yeah. So when you're encouraging employees to take compensation in Bitcoin, how does that work? Do you just say, oh, by the way, we're doing this thing. If anyone wants to, you can. Do you like sit them down and talk to them about it and be like, and like try to push them in that direction? And then like, how's the response been for that? Do you offer them like a bonus if they do? Like, how's that figured out?
So the way that I've done it is I've just left it on the table, right? It's like, here's
Mhm.
how we can do payments for you. You know, we can do a paper check, we can do a wire, we can do Zelle, you know, Venmo,
Mhm.
Bitcoin, you know, and it's just a part of the regular conversation, right?
Mhm.
And what we've done as far as Bitcoin goes is like, you know, on the company wiki page that we have, you know, it kind of goes through the process. Like, if you're interested in taking Bitcoin, here's what's going to happen.
Mhm.
Here's what you need to do to get it. Here's what you need to use to store it, you know, securely. Here's a couple of reference videos, and we try to give it, you know, its own little Wikipedia page for us, so they have some education on it. Again, I also give workshops for anybody that's interested that wants to take it. Um, and then people will be like, "I'm curious. Yeah, I'll do it." And then to make up for the volatility as well, you know, we do add a little bit of a bonus just to make sure, like,
Mhm.
hey, when you get it today, it's not going to be like $10 less tomorrow. Like, here's a cushion. We understand that there's some issues. Just
Mhm.
let me know. And
What's a good percentage cushion in your experience?
so between a 10 to 15% has been all right. You know,
Yeah.
it's a little,
That's nice.
you know, yeah, it seems to work for them. You know, of course, like bull markets, you know, we don't really have to do as much. Um, but it's just teaching people the basics of like how to get it, what do you need to do. But it's never forced on anybody. And
Mhm.
kind of the way I've been hoping that the transition is, you know, you just think of it as your everyday payment. You know, it's not like the branding, I'm, you know, this coin, I'm that crypto, I'm that whatever. It's just, hey, you know, here's dollars, here's Bitcoin. Which one do you want to get paid in? Right. Let's
Mhm.
just normalize this and not make it a thing, you know?
Yeah. So the
And
cushion,
mhm,
the cushion obviously is a cost. And
yeah,
so when you're accounting for everything, right? You got the price of mailing a check, the price of payment processing through these
right.
things, and then the price of paying in Bitcoin could either be, an on-chain transaction fee, or if you happen to have a Lightning wallet, it could be whatever the cost of like maintaining channel liquidity and all the other stuff. But then there's the 15% on top of that, 15% away. Does it do you save some money by using this, so you're actually incentivized to give them a discount, I guess? Like, how, like, does it make sense? Does it make actual business sense today, or is it more of a an investment in the future kind of thing?
It's a little of both, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, for me, I've been doing this for 22 years now, and
Mm-hmm.
I've just watched the pay for animators just kind of race to the bottom everywhere, right? It's such a global thing, and I personally, which I'm just looking at it from my own perspective, is like, I want to be able to preserve what I'm doing. I want to give my work value again. How do I do
Mm-hmm.
that? And I know it's still a very early thing, but you know, the people that I've built, and that's some part that I don't think I've really thought about much. It just kind of happens naturally. Is that the people that I'm paying in Bitcoin is like, we've developed a much stronger relationship because of that. You know, if there's a
Mm-hmm.
problem, I'm here to help, right? Um, let's talk about it. What's the issue? You know, how can we be of service? And so for them, it's like, yeah, there's that investment in the future. Um, and the other part is just looking out for the well-being of my team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's people that, you know, they don't have a bank account still, or they live in parts of the world where it's like, their currency is wildly volatile, you know. So how do I take care of them as best they can, right? And then as far as the incentives goes, I mean, capital gains and all that's like, yeah, but you can harvest your capital loss too, you know.
Yeah.
And if you've got millions in revenue and you're going to get hit, you know, with a high, you know, percentage on your taxes at the end of the year, I mean, you want to try to find places to take the loss where you can. You know, obviously you don't want
Mm-hmm.
to go to a point where it's like I'm breaking even or I'm in the red, but you know, hey, I can take this one. It's going to help me out this quarter, you know, or uh, I know the valuation is going to go up, you know, just because of usage and how things play out, you know, on the markets. So we'll hedge on that one. So I mean, it's been very good for us. I know our CPA and bookkeeper. Uh, I
Doesn't
give
like
them
you.
gray hairs, but you know, we try to be as organized and detailed as possible, and it's been pretty good. You know, I mean, we've got a system now where it works for us, and You know, maybe one day we'll write a book about like how we do it, and then share
Yeah.
that out. Maybe open source and just be like, hey, here's a website that everything that we've done. And take this for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to have um, conversations with, for example, Roger Ver, who is a big proponent of paying in crypto, and then
Mm,
also the Edge Wallet people. I think they paid their salaries in Bitcoin for many years, and
right.
I know like it's been a little difficult, like in some ways because of just like the payroll systems aren't really there and all this kind of stuff. But so you have to like keep separate accounting and just like manually pay it as different addresses, and I'm sure all that stuff is like way more advanced today. You
Yeah,
know?
it's getting better. Like it's getting better. Like with each month, something new pops out. It's getting
Mm-hmm.
smoother, which is really nice. I mean, now I know our CPA was very skeptical about the whole thing to begin with. Still a little on the skeptical side, but after
Mm-hmm.
we changed the accounting a little bit and how we process things, it's like, okay, I can see the value in it, right? Like his experience has been everybody kind of day trades, and they make large sums of fiat.
That's the real crypto experience for like 99.9% of the world. You know, it's true.
Yeah. And so he's kind of confused when he's like, you guys are actually using this as money. I'm like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's what I've understood this to be. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a I was at a meetup a couple of days ago, and that was kind of the debate. It's like, I think, like, I've been using crypto for several months, a little less than a year, and he's like, it's a store of value. All right, well, what's the value? You know, and everybody will talk price, but no one will talk the value of things.
Yeah.
And they're two
Where did the price come from?
right, and that's sort of the conversation that we're not having. Is
Mm-hmm.
what is value? What does it mean? Is it the miners? No, it's not the miners. It's not the brand. It's the power to transact. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it gives a new meaning to the phrase purchasing power. You know, if you don't have any power to purchase, right? It's
Yeah.
that's huge. That's wildly, like, to me, it's wildly undervalued. At this point.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways of sort of quantifying that. I remember, and this is just like the emotional side, because you could talk all day long about like the fees this and the middleman that and all this kind of stuff. But I remember having a negative experience with money most of my life before I switched to
Mm,
crypto. There just there's like an apprehension to it of like, is the card gonna work, for example? Because
mm,
sometimes it doesn't, or which sometimes I do get anxiety with like certain payment processors with crypto, of like, oh, is it gonna work? Because it's such a complicated new space. But as far as like, is the card gonna work, and then like the authorization thing, like we put your account on hold or this and that, or like all the it just money fiat money is a very like serious business kind of a thing. It's kind of like going into like a government office and like, do you hereby swear that all the information is correct, and just you're on edge. It's like a very on edge experience. And when you look at your bank account, especially when you're a poor person, and you never know, no one knows what they're going to find when they look at a bank account, their checking account, let's just say,
mhm.
because it's going to be different all the time, because anyone who you gave that like card number to can just take money out of the account, and
Right.
whereas you get dispute charges and other things, but it's this thing where you never know how much money you have. And there's
Right.
the anxiety as a poor person, like, what if I got hit with a bill and now I can't afford this thing? You just never know. Since crypto, it's not been necessarily stress free, but I feel I enjoy using the money. I enjoy moments notice. Never have to like think twice about like, well, is this going to be documented the right way, or it just works. You just do it and it works. And
Right.
there's just something about that, the free flow. It's kind of like speaking on an uncensored forum where you're not scared of like a moderator flagging you and like shutting down your whole account because you said the wrong thing. There's this joy that comes with the freedom of exercising something, being
Right.
free, being loose. And just like when people are scared or socially anxious, and then they have a couple drinks, and then they get loosened up, they love it, they're having fun because they can say whatever
Right.
they want kind of now. It's the same sort of a feeling with money. And there's a lot of I'm sure it's hard to quantify like the fun, like the benefits of using crypto. Like it's hard to quantify them all the way to be like, well, I saved this much money, or I unlocked these opportunities, or I removed this much friction. It's really hard to kind of quantify it, but like over a long period of time, I mean, I can't imagine switching back to, using fiat on a day-to-day basis. It would be a little rough.
Yeah, I mean, my experience, like with banks, I have a good relationship with my banker, for the business,
Hmm.
you know, but man, even he has frustrations dealing with, their systems that they have to go through. And I think the part where you're mentioning, you're not worried about, whether this is going to work or not is because you know what you have, right? You know how much money you have at a given point in time and what kind of funds you can use. And
Hmm.
that's been, for a lot of people, that's liberating. But I think that's also the part of sound money, which people don't really talk about either, right? Everyone's like, this is the soundest money in the world. This is the soundest money in the world. This is, we want Austrian economic systems. We want this in play, but you know, have they ever actually used that?
Hmm.
Right? Most people that I know are still really heavy on the credit cards, right? And they'll swipe and swipe and swipe, take care of things now and immediately, and then they'll look back at their bank statements, be like, "Oh, I overpaid for this. I have an overdraft for that," because nobody really knows what money is, right?
Hmm.
And it's like, yeah, well, part of sound money is you have it or you don't. You're not going to
Yeah.
try and get a loan, use your credit cards to take care of all this stuff. It's like you have what you have, right?
Yeah.
And you can feel a little bit more confident in that. And I think the issue with saving in fiat currencies, of course, is also, obviously the devaluation, right? Um, but even more so is the idea that, like you were talking about on the forums, if the moderator doesn't like what you have to say, you know, they kick you out. And in the fiat system, if you're late on a bill, from your credit card company, or you owe your taxes and you miss a date, they seize your accounts. That's essentially censoring you out of the forum, right?
Hmm.
So not only do you have what you have and you can feel confident in spending, but you also can feel confident knowing that your funds are in your control. And that's a part I think a lot of people in the space, at least from what I've been seeing, on.
Don't use it, because when they do use it, you feel the joy a little bit, you know? Where so I am probably more acutely affected by bear markets than anyone except for those lunatics who just got obliterated, right?
Yeah,
But emotionally, I'm affected much less because using stuff on a day-to-day basis, I get the utility day to day, and the purchasing power fluctuates, but the utility, the experience just gets better year after year,
right.
and it's kind of interesting to see like the how do you quantify being able to quantify freedom, because there is a price on things, right? People do everything has a price. Every little inconvenience has a price. Every convenience has a price. And so there's just something about the control over your money that, so like when a payment, I've experienced before when I'm trying to, like, I receive a payment, or I something happens with the app I'm using
Hmm.
where it doesn't show the right amount. Like I didn't get this, or I don't have anything in there. And then a lot more often it happens when I'm showing new people how to use this stuff. But then it's like you can always go to the block explorer and find the ultimate source of truth. Like, well, let's just see. Boom. Okay, well, you still have it. We just, like, I had a friend of mine who was like, oh, I'm trying to like sell some crypto here, and I just opened my hardware wallet and I don't have, all this is missing of this coin. I can't get it. Like, what happened? And so then I'm just like, do a little sniff around, a little forensics and stuff. And of course, it's all there because nothing is in a wallet, doesn't contain funds. Crypto, they
Right.
call it a wallet, it doesn't contain funds. It's just the keys, the magic keys to the digital hyperledger, whatever, that
Right.
contains everything. And if you just see, like, if you're just seeing it like behind the glass on the block explorer, just like, well, it's still there. I just haven't figured out how to fix the app so I can get at it and move it, but it's still there and it's still firmly in my control. And to like a different level, there's another friend who went through a very, as far as I know, a very amicable divorce that otherwise would have very much not been an amicable divorce because of the percentage of net worth in private key held crypto, of
Right.
where it's, if you have money, like if you have like fiat in accounts places and stuff, it's a lot easier to just like have someone say arbitrarily, well, according to this, we want to give all this to someone else through whatever circumstances, justified or not, and then you just get wrecked. But if you have your own keys, it's just with your own crypto. There's, I guess there's still a way of like compelling you to give stuff up, just saying like you owe this and there's consequences without this. But they don't just like run off with your money, because it's
Right.
it's your money. It's not money that you're using today. It's actually your money, and that's something that's like, it's hard for people to wrap their head around, you know, getting like the actual ownership of a digital asset, and the fact that they don't own other digital assets.
Yeah, I think it's just ownership in general. Because I
Hmm.
mean, I think the point that you're not in control, you
Yeah.
know. So when people understand fiat, like that's for me, it's like fiat. Oh, I don't actually own it. Like if you took the time to read Dodd-Frank, and the
Hmm.
clauses within the banking system, and you realize the moment you hand your check or your cash over to them, it's no longer your property, should
Hmm.
terrify everyone, right?
Yeah.
Bank bail-ins are a real thing, and people are very unaware of it. But maybe subconsciously, people still feel that sense of anxiety. It's like, I don't own anything, right? What do you
Hmm.
truly own? Um, I know Brian Harrington was posting about home ownership and all that, and it's like, okay, the concept of, do you really own your home if you don't pay your taxes, etc. But that's really the bigger conversation. The bigger topic on that one is, hey, yeah, I owe the government something. I'm still
Yeah.
paying rent to somebody. It's like that one. Remember, there was a Canadian clause in their real estate
Oh yeah, I saw that.
book, which blew my mind. Right? It's like you're only getting a license to live here.
Yeah, you're
You
getting a
know?
lease from the government.
Yeah. So it's like that sort of anxiety. Might sound trivial, but it's still there. Knowing that, do I really own this? Do I really own that? Do I really have
Hmm.
any possessions that is my own, that I'm not paying somebody to rent or to hold? I mean, even the idea that we pay capital gains tax, on any asset that we sell. It's like, well, do we really own that too? Right?
Hmm.
We
Who
just
would
got the
own anything?
privilege. Yeah, we got the privilege to hold it for a while, tax free until we spend it, and now it's, hey, pay your fair share. So I
Yeah.
think there's like this global consciousness of people feeling various levels of anxiety, right?
Hmm.
Especially those at the top where, most of the lifestyle is funded on debt, you know, and
Yeah.
it makes you very, very nervous all the time. And so, yeah, you feel empowered with, crypto or with Bitcoin because they're yours, right? And
Yeah.
somebody wants to take it away from you, well, they've got to negotiate peacefully and transact, or you're not getting it, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like on your terms, and there's just something about putting consent back into the thing kind of makes systems stronger, because the relationship's kind of if it's based on ownership and consent, then you don't just you don't get to make deals with people that they're not satisfied with, as long as they don't get so dissatisfied that they do something very drastic.
Right,
Like, it's kind of like with the government system, you're doing things to your people that they don't like. They really don't like it, but you're getting away with it. You just, if you push it too far, they're gonna like throw the whole thing over, riot in the streets, burn stuff down. So you can't go that far, but there's a significant leeway of dissatisfaction you can put on
right,
people. Whereas the tolerance for dissatisfaction in the free market is about as thin as, the opportunity cost or the mental cost of going to a competitor, really. And so
right,
that whole thing where, it's not like you're never going to pay a bill again if you're living on crypto. Of course, you're going to still pay for everything, but there's always that, like, you know what? Like, it's not like the gym membership has your direct deposit, your, information, and just keeps on taking money out of your account, and you got to hassle them to get them to stop. It's just like you pay the gym, and then you don't when you don't go there, and just
Right.
don't. And they can't. And now it's on them to try to shake you down for more money, to be like, hey, can you come back? Can you keep paying us? But otherwise, it's just like, the digital cash kind of component is kind of interesting. There was
Yeah.
something interesting in this story, but before that, I did get a question from Great Wolf, who said, I'll give him a freebie here. He says, sounds like, in his opinion, the ease of being able to transact is why crypto is valuable. Does that mean if Bitcoin ever gets so hard to transact because of high fees, does that mean Bitcoin becomes less valuable? So, just generally, how's your experience been then with the fee situation on Bitcoin? Because depending on, 2017, 2018 is like the horror years. But
Hmm.
other than that, there's been ups and downs and stuff. And how's that kind of affected you?
It hasn't affected us much.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I mean, we've been managed to send out, tens of thousands of dollars for like 15 cents, and that wasn't bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, either we're
Yeah.
just super lucky or we catch it, and when the mempool's low. Um, but oftentimes it's like, yeah, we might pay $1 here, but it's not anything that's of super heavy convenience.
Mm-hmm.
But this is running it as a business.
Yeah.
I'll take the fee and use that as expense write-offs. I'll take what I can get too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on the person to person side of stuff, there is I'm not a big spender as it is. So when I'm going to buy something, with Bitcoin, it's like, well, how bad do
Mm-hmm.
I really want it? Right. And the fee will often be the thing that determines, whether I want to spend or not. And sometimes, again, I've been fortunate enough, those last several months where the fees hasn't been too high. And I've been using Lightning, of course, which has just made it a little easier for me too. But this is a topic that I've mentioned with. I got into a debate with somebody about the whole sound money aspect, right? It's like you're going to
Mm-hmm.
go to Amazon, you're going to buy something you really want. If you're not that much in a rush, you'll choose, the free option. But if you really want it now, right? How much are you willing to pay for it? What's that transaction to you? So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody, at least from what my conversation so far, is like people want sound money to act like fiat money. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of find that really interesting and confusing because, well, sound money has a different behavior mechanic than, fiat does. It's
Yeah.
now on one side, and the other one is like, well, I'm going to give this up. Is this worth it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the return value? So if the fee is there, and it's like, okay, I'm going to pay $5 or whatever, then how much of this is worth it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like that's the part where I'm not really. I'm so confused with the whole stablecoin thing because, like, with Ethereum gas fees to send,
Yeah.
it's absolutely ridiculous. So it's like that's
Ethereum makes
almost
no
unusual.
sense to me. Yeah, like, and I'm not saying that as an insult either. I think that Ethereum, it's clearly etched its place in history already. Like it's
Yeah.
clear for a while based on its pure innovation, and especially in a crowded field, right? Whereas like
Hmm.
Bitcoin got first move. Like, let's be honest, like if you compare Bitcoin and Litecoin, if Litecoin come out a couple years before Bitcoin, I don't think anyone would be using Bitcoin really. It's really hard to tell. Like with all the network effect and all the development stuff just got, because Litecoin is extremely similar other than the block times and then the total supply, which is,
Hmm.
I guess kind of arbitrary. It's harder to tell, but like, Ethereum clearly did stuff. However, I would like to know who's paying all these fees, because I have used Bitcoin a little bit over the last few years. I have not used Ethereum because I can't. I can't. I have a bunch of, not a bunch. I have like a couple $100 worth of random tokens and some Ethereum, and I can't do anything with them because if I consolidated them, they would be destroyed by fees. There'd be nothing
Right.
left. And like stablecoin stuff, like I cannot understand why you would pay 20, $30 to move dollars, when you could ACH it and pay way less. you
Right.
know, or I don't know, or comparable. It's I don't understand the appeal of that, but that's a it's funny. The free market's never wrong. There's a reason why people are doing that, and the reason is because they derive value from doing that in excess of the costs. And so, for example, what I realized with all this like DeFi stuff on Ethereum, it's that people get to make these crazy trades and make a lot of money in ways that they can't really do on centralized exchanges or don't want to do because they'd have to KYC, or there's the inherent risk of being KYC or the exchange going down, all those centralized institution risks. And so
Right.
they're paying all this extra money to not have to do that. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of crazy, and I guess there's a premium on just kind of like the most expensive brands do pay. A lot of times you pay a premium just for the brand name for whatever that comes with, for the lack of uncertainty that brings. And so I've kind of come to a conclusion where like when the fees were absurd with Bitcoin, 18, when the Bitcoin fees were like $20-$30, like it's clearly, you know, but then lately that doesn't happen because like the fees might be a lot higher, but people like, I would rather pay 50 cents for a Bitcoin transaction than a 50th of a cent for a Bitcoin cash transaction, for example, is something a lot of people have opted for. Or it's like, I'll spend $1 or $2 to use Bitcoin because if I used, let's just say Litecoin, I'd have to like trade, it'd be harder to use because not as many people care about it, or I'd have to like eventually swap it for Bitcoin anyway, which incurs an additional cost. So yeah, it does kind of make sense with that. What I find is very fascinating is how Bitcoin is the biggest privacy coin in the world. As much as I hate that term, privacy coin, but there's more money in. First off, there's more money in the Whirlpool, which is like a big coin join that Samurai Wallet and other people use.
Right.
There's more money in the Whirlpool than there is in the Lightning Network. I can't imagine how expensive that's got to be to mix a big pot of Bitcoin with like it's not just one transaction fee. You have to spend a bunch of transaction fees, but it's worth it to people because I guess the liquidity of Bitcoin offers its own manner of privacy, and so they'd rather have a private Bitcoin transaction than in a lot of cases like a Monero transaction where there's like fewer places to get it, and it's kind of yeah, it's just interesting the way the fees work because people pay the 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 fee market is undefeated, right? The free market and then the fee market is undefeated. It tells you you can't say it's wrong. People pay for what they pay for, and it might just be lack of information. But eventually, if someone has the information on a better way, they're going to make a lot more money than the chumps paying the high fees. It all evens out in the end.
Right. I mean, I think as far as like the fees go and all that stuff, I don't know where that's going to end up in a few years, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know what's happening now. Like with Taproot, for example. We've had excellent experience with Taproot. And we've moved a lot of stuff on that side. And I mean, transaction costs are nil. For
Mm-hmm.
us. And for me personally, the privacy aspect of it has been really good too. Um, the thing that a lot of this stuff is engineering, right? I mean, over time,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, if we believe that people will want to design better products and services around it, they're going to. You
Yeah.
there'll be a lot of arguing along the way, um, but then I guess that's probably the difference between like Bitcoin, which is it seems to be yeah, it's slow. Thank God for a slow reason. Like you don't want it to, if this is going to last, hundreds of years. Do we want to rush it in a year, or do we want it to take as long as it needs in order to be as strong and as solid as it's going to be, or
Mm-hmm.
are we going to try to rush it, so that way it can mimic fiat, and then the other part that this is something I've heard from the new guys who've been taking crypto as payments and they start getting into it is like all the infighting in crypto, right?
Yeah.
So like that part is a big turnoff for the everyday person, So much respect to Roger Ver, um,
Mm-hmm.
but some of the things that he said, to other people or his fighting, or the people he picks on, or even Vitalik for his own reasons, some of the things that he says, it's off-putting for some folks, and that's where I feel like maybe the biggest flaw or liability to these projects are their founders. You know, you have a point of pressure or a point where that can break,
Yeah.
and that can turn people away from them. And it's like,
Well,
well,
let me just give a very concrete example on that, of two different ways that this is shaken out. Um, and it's no secret I'm not like, because I'm long in the tooth in the crypto world. I'm not a fan of most founders or people like that. Uh, Monero's been very interesting. It flippened Bitcoin Cash to market cap very recently,
yeah,
and Roger Ver himself has been hinting. I believe, again, I'm not throwing. I have no idea what I could just ask him. I'm sure he'd tell me, but I have a feeling he's made some moves into Monero as well. But I remember, so Fluffy Pony was a guy who's not necessarily Monero's founder,
hmm,
but he was like the guy who ran the show, which everyone says, oh, decentralized. Yeah, but someone runs things. It's like, let's be honest. He's the guy who ran shit for years, and he caused so many toxic divides with so many communities, and gotten so many fights, and it directly and indirectly courted so many like abject criminals to be part of the project and things like that. And there's just a lot of shady things, a lot of like, it really held Monero back long term. And then he kind of left the project like a couple of years ago, and I mean, since then he got like arrested over like fraud, over like basically embezzling from his like cookie shop. He used to work in IT, like doing invoices back in, you can't make this up, cookies, but in South Africa. And so like he,
okay,
he like he's someone, he doesn't like me, I don't like him, whatever. But since his influence has gone away, I think Monero's done pretty well. Like, obviously the market rankings compared to its contemporaries, it seems to have done quite well. But also like the Monero toxicity, like as I mentioned before, like I wrote some article for Cointelegraph about one of the big darknet markets going exit scamming.
hmm,
That was one of the big ones that the Monero community was super promoting. And within 15 minutes of the article publication, there was like a straight down candle in the price. Like you saw like the price go down,
go.
but it's still like, violent intent and stuff. And like the community is known for being like toxic and terrible. And then now there might be some people around that still do that, but they graduated past that phase. I think
Right.
they're just real people now. And then Litecoin was another one that was just, it was kind of like Doge. It didn't exist. Basically, it was on its way out, and then Charlie Lee got it on Coinbase, and then mega pumped it, and then all that kind of stuff. It was the first Coinbase pump coin, back when that still had its power. And it's kind of like Doge. Like Doge was also like nowhere, like adrift, until Elon, who's like the new founder, sort of, just by a couple of mystical tweets, just had its heyday, and then now it's kind of sliding. But you
Right.
kind of do see like the I think that unfortunately with crypto, a lot of projects live and die by their founders, and it's basically every project is a little like that. And Bitcoin had this interesting, like, Satoshi did so much right, and then got out of the way at a great juncture when there was enough guidance, but then
Hmm.
not too much to where it's like now it's all about Satoshi. Who's Satoshi? What are you going to do?
Right.
And I mean, I would also argue though that the block size wars are sort of a a illness caused by Satoshi's absence. Meaning, if there'd been like Gavin Andreessen as the clear inheritor of Satoshi's legacy, ended up kind of getting pushed to the side, and then the next generation of devs sort of took it in the off chain scaling direction, and it could have been like, what if Bitcoin had gone the Bitcoin Cash route since the beginning? Could have been very different. There's a lot of like who knows to that
Yeah,
whole thing.
it's
But
there.
today, I do say that having no founder's legacy hanging over the thing makes it a much more, I guess, trustable. You can kind of trust it more, the way it
Yeah,
is.
because the thing that kind of gets me
Mm-hmm.
is like if this is people like this is supposed to be money, and these
Mm-hmm.
founders are just out there being charismatic and outspoken, and then it damages somebody's monetary ability to pay things and their value. I'm like, that's damaged trust, right? And I know
Mm-hmm.
like the motto is like don't trust, verify, but that's as far as the transaction goes, you know. But people are first, for a fact, trusting in a system, right? People
Mm-hmm.
trust fiat up to a certain point until they find out, hey, it's riddled with abuse. And then crypto, all these founders being what they are, yeah, it's a liability, and you burn people, and it's like, how many people are going to ever come back again, right? They'll leave
Mm-hmm.
the marketplace altogether. And so the thing that I've noticed is like it's so young and early, and the way a lot of ego gets in the way is very, very dangerous, right? And people, you screw it up, how many chances do you get again, right? And with regards to the block size, that's one that I've been still digging into this. Like for us in the
Yeah.
Western world, like that's a big, it's nothing, right? What's a megabyte? But somebody who's in Central South America still operating on flip phones,
Mm-hmm.
it's like that megabyte is pretty expensive, and being able to run their own node and get the parts, and or in another remote part of the world where it's not easily as accessible, it's like, yeah, it might make sense for a smaller block size in order for more to participate. Maybe, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I wasn't there, um, but that's just one of those things I look at. It's like a lot of that stuff is engineering. Hopefully it does get resolved. Like I'm not an engineer. I'm an artist. I have a
Mm-hmm.
pencil. I just
Yeah.
pick a stylus and draw pixels. Um, but yeah, I think the founders are a liability. It's like, just stop bringing the spotlight. And sometimes I also wonder what was the ultimatum, for making the fork or the split or a new chain or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the part where I just from my side with new people getting into it, they'll look into stuff and be like, hey, do you know this coin? Here's this founder, and they'll follow, and then they'll get discouraged because it's something that they said, or
Yeah.
and it's like,
Something crazy.
yeah. So I mean, you're messing with people's money, right? It's a highly sensitive, topic. So it's like, I don't know if these founders are aware of that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, if you say something out of line, or you create this toxicity, people will leave, your project will die. And, it's not supposed to be a project, it's supposed to be money, right?
Yeah. Of course, it's supposed to
So,
be, kind of evergreen in that way. And one
yeah.
thing I think is kind of funny about the founder, if you're into looking up into founders, look into Dan Larimer
Yeah.
because his legacy is interesting, and I know a lot of people that use it, and I know a lot of people who came into crypto from Steam and Hive, like directly. They didn't even come to Bitcoin first, and then I didn't care for EOS at all, but I think the one of the most popular NFT blockchains is the Wax blockchain, which is based on EOS, and it got tons of usage and stuff like that. There's clearly like a legacy to this dude's work, but at the same time, he comes out there with BitShares, and
Right.
then when he gets tired of BitShares, he just dumps the project. It kind of goes away, and he jumps over to Steam. And then he gets bored of Steam, he dumps the project, and then that goes away. And he goes to EOS. It's super hyped. It's like one of these big things. They spend like $20 million on a domain name or whatever the hell, all that stuff. And then eventually he just dumps that. Now he's like trying to move on to something else, and like EOS has just gone in the toilet since then. And it's kind of like he's the serial founder as far as like the ride or die, like live or die by the founder's word kind of guy. And
Right.
whenever he's there, his the product does well, and he gets tired of it and jumps to something new, which is kind of interesting.
I mean, I'm kind of looking at it as like, imagine you're living in a country where,
Mm-hmm.
the ruler is like, hey, this is the money we're using today. Okay, I'm bored with that. Let's change it to something else because I don't like this no more.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, how dangerous is that? Yeah, the projects might be interesting, but a lot of regular people who want to get into
Mm-hmm.
this space, they want to use it, and they don't, they're not technically sound, which is frighteningly more than what people anticipate it to actually be. um, it's like it's scary, right? So yeah, I'm going to use this project because it's faster, cheaper. The block size is infinite, and
Yeah.
then the founder goes away, or like I dump it, and it's like, well, what do I do with my money now? You know,
Yeah.
it's such a
Yeah.
such a risky thing.
20% basically risk free, you know?
Yeah, well, you are the yield, right?
Yeah.
And that's the other part. I think with Celsius now is having
Mm-hmm.
some interesting topics being brought up about what's going on with I forgot his name, Alex something.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, yeah, it's probably just shut up, go away, like just let your. I don't know, it's almost it is very Hollywood like, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You have Josh Whedon, who at one point was really big for Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Marvel, and then he becomes an outspoken activist, and then people start digging into his history and past, and now nobody wants to hire Josh Whedon again or ever watch a movie that he's made, and you know, it's easy to wreck
Yeah.
reputation.
I mean,
So
isn't the Depp Heard trial going on right now about that kind of a thing? Like the Pirates franchise living and dying by this one man, and then through I'm not familiar enough to the situation to definitively say he's the good guy in the situation, but it seems like it seems like he got besmirched. But whatever it is, it's just now it's like the you can't have pirates without him. It just
yeah,
can't really. It doesn't really work.
right. It's so I just kind of see the correlations between the two,
Mm-hmm.
industries. And it's like, yeah, this I've seen it, tons of times, where the writer, director, producer, production company, whatever, does something inappropriate or out of whack, out of line, and then the project's dead, right? And I've seen millions of dollars being pumped into production, and the the top voice actor does something out of turn, and then all of a sudden the project is pulled. Never, even though there's been millions of dollars invested in it, never to see the light of day. You know,
Yeah,
it's like
it is.
that. That's terrifying. You know.
Yeah, that is pretty insane. Let's wrap up on this story here.
All right.
Developing countries love metaverse, rich nations not so keen. WEF survey. Developing countries have more than double the amount of people positive that the metaverse will impact their lives, and they'd use it on a day-to-day basis in comparison with developed countries. China, India, Peru. India being 75%. And if you look at the little graph for the survey, it's like, yeah, it shows it like the more developing the countries, almost it seems, the
Mhm.
higher the sentiment towards the metaverse. The metaverse as if it's like one thing. But
Yeah.
what's your take on that thing?
I'm mixed, very
Mm-hmm.
mixed. Um, to me, it just screams out people's desire to own things, to
Mm-hmm.
own their identity, to own something, but they can't do it in the present state, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's something that they can't hold on to right now physically, whether that's their money, their possessions, their relationships, whatever the case may be. And so the metaverse is kind of that Ready Player One escape, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how things are developing. I mean, during the lockdowns in 2020, how Animal Crossing was the main work hub for a lot of people, which I thought was really weird and entertaining at the same time. Um, and watching Facebook's meta, just kind of take place, and it's like, is this how it's really going to be? Like
Mm-hmm.
even though we're doing things remotely, you're still a person on the other end of the screen. My soon to be is on the other side of the room. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you still bump into people if you go to a cafe or a restaurant, and that's in the developed world, yeah, we still enjoy those privileges and things to have, but places where like in China, like what do you really own? I don't know. I don't live there. I don't know what it's really like, but um, that just to me it just seems like the escape, and
Well,
people wanting that.
yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting because when you got physical property, uh, that's one thing I've learned is the people at the very top of the pyramid are always doing okay. Like Kim Jong Un is doing fine, you know, his people not so much, and so there's always there's always people who are like doing well in whatever developed countries, but in developing countries, uh, the resources are probably controlled a lot more by the powers that be that kind of don't really give the people the freedom to acquire their own capital in a lot of ways. At least not there just isn't those there isn't the same opportunity. But in the digital world, they're equal. So like if you are a young kid in Ghana versus a young kid in, let's just say, Minneapolis, right?
Right.
There's a giant disparity in your opportunity, your lifetime opportunity. Which might, based on the way Africa's going, it might be quite different in like 50 years. But like right now, there's a huge disparity in opportunity between those two people. But if they get on a computer and start messing around with the metaverse, all of a sudden they're the same. All of a
Right.
sudden, except one might have a little bit more drive even to get there. And so when you start owning digital property and moving into the digital space, just like with starting with Bitcoin, you could own digital property, like actually own your money and control your own money. And then you're starting to add other things that you have that you can own. Like, what if you spend enough time to where your the value of your metaversal being, when again, a weird territory here, right? But is the same as people on the developed world, and then that can then reflect. You can parlay that into the meat space and get to a better meat space from there. And so
Yeah. I mean,
it's kind of
yeah, that's
interesting the way that works.
yeah. This is where like again, like I'm mixed
Mm-hmm.
because with remote work, like my company started remotely, and
Mm-hmm.
people were calling me crazy for doing something like that, and but for me, it put me on equal
It's
ground
just so
with
funny how like the crypto world, it's
yeah.
just like, what, you have an office? What are you, a chump? Like it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, people called me crazy for doing it,
Mm-hmm.
but it put me on equal footing with some of the larger production companies,
Mm-hmm.
and you had to hustle a lot harder and build from there. And so I kind of see the same opportunity for people in the metaverse, where yeah, you could create new businesses and ventures. I think just in my own experience with like having the business now 100% remote is that I'm doing things from home,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes we have to. We've been going to a shared workspace every now and then just to remind ourselves what it's like to be around other human beings, sensibilities, and all that stuff. You try to be in a civilized place,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I think maybe that's something where the trappings of the metaverse might. I don't know if it's going to be good or bad on that part. Like if somebody lives their life entirely in the metaverse and they never have human contact, maybe that's what they want and it works for them. But I mean, I really, I'm just split. I don't know which way to go.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, could be both ways, right? Because if I think about it, if people spend, it's always like value versus scarcity, right?
Mhm.
And when you have people value the physical world, and especially when like physical objects become rare and the
Right.
physical world becomes rare, it then pumps the price. And so, even when you're not talking about a market specifically, like I have worked in offices before and I didn't really enjoy it. And you just like see the same people every day in and out. And then now when I work digitally and I see a work colleague in the real world, I think I value that a lot more than I would have if I saw them every day. And so I think that what it's going to do is it's going to make more efficient a lot of the physical interactions that we don't want to have. They're kind of mundane. And then it's sort of like when you're doing like online ordering or self checkout. It's like you don't have to do this annoying, unpleasant thing with a human being. You can just do it more efficiently with a screen and get out of there. And then you save all your human interaction potential and cravings for something you really value. You kind of like redirect that there. And so I think that the metaverse is going to start to, it's going to build, it's obviously a new world. There's going to be people whose whole lives are on there. But at some point, it's going to add the scarcity to IRL, like the value of like IRL kings, right? So like if you're like everyone's just on their same thing, but it's like, oh, but guess what? Like I have like verifiable evidence that I hiked the Andes Mountains, and then it's like the
Right.
people that don't. It's just like, well, it's like right now, it's like any jackass in their Instagram, because their parents are rich or they travel or whatever. But like if everyone's doing that, like now it's gonna all of a sudden be something of like greater value. Or if you're in great physical shape, let's say,
Mhm.
and fewer people are probably in great physical shape if you don't have to be, if you just have to be working on your the cut of your abs and your skin on your NFT skin, you buy the ab skin, like, or however, whatever ridiculous nonsense is going to end up being. But then in the real world, you don't have it. But then the people who do have it in the real world, all of a sudden, that's a bigger premium than just any old in shape person. So it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see the the, the play back and forth between the digital and the physical.
Yeah. I think the like I'm an introvert,
Mm-hmm.
by nature, default, whatever, and you know, meeting up with other introverts is always pleasant. For some reason or another,
Mm-hmm.
you can just vibe and be like, oh yeah, we're the same. But once you get in with an extrovert, and it's draining, it's soul sucking, and it's the worst.
Too much, yeah.
Yeah. So like conferences, I die like every time, and I feel like I need several years of vacation before I can recoup and go to the next one. Um, but I mean, at the same time, it's like, yeah, the scarcity of meeting people. I mean, it's happening right now, right? Like most
Mm-hmm.
people, like in offices who work remote, tend to just stay in, and then you're able to go outside and enjoy a farmer's market or go downtown and just buy some food, or
Mm-hmm.
like we're fortunate enough to have the beach close by, so just like walk by the ocean and hey, this is great. What the hell are we doing inside all day? You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, I'm interested to see where it goes. It's That's it. That's really it for me. I just want to see where it goes, what happens, what's next, and
Yeah.
life's interesting.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to wait too long to see. Well, it seems like a great point to wrap this whole thing on. Thanks for being on for pushing 2 hours here. Um,
Oops.
where could people find more about you and what you do and just everything you want to shell?
So you can find more about my company at echo-bridge.com. And
Mm-hmm.
usually we have a blog that we update, fairly inconsistency, just when we have something to
Mm-hmm.
say. Uh, I'm on Twitter at SVNBTC. You can always
Mm-hmm.
find out on Joel's links that he's been retweeting. Um,
Yeah.
I tend to be very, very low profile, so I
Mm-hmm.
keep my digital presence scarce.
Yeah. Well, there we go. Everyone follow him on Twitter. He's a good follow with like no followers. So you get in on the ground floor. You get on the ground floor there. Um, and yeah, everyone have a great weekend, and I will see you guys next week.